So my story for you, I make a living now as an author and a writer and a speaker, but my previous career, as you mentioned, is I was a project manager. I was a practitioner in a lot of the things that have been talked about yesterday and so far today. And so my job was to lead a team of engineers and designers and marketers in actually making stuff. And in Internet Explorer 1 through 5, this is the mid-90s at Microsoft, and we shipped software about every 3 months. 3 to 4 months. We shipped a new version of Internet Explorer every 3 or 4 months. And a lot of that stuff was focused on trying to invent. I was told my job was to lead a team of people to find new ideas, make the product better, and get it out the door. And doing this, I was very young when I worked on this project. I didn't know a whole lot, so I started studying history. And I wanted to read, what did Edison do? What did Einstein do? What did Da Vinci do? Not what do we think they did, but what were their actual methods? How did they think about their work? And I became an amateur historian. So as my career developed, I had this parallel career as sort of a researcher in processes, and I wanted to understand the history of how this stuff worked. And that's what this book is about. So when I quit Microsoft to write books, I knew I wanted to write a book about all the things I wish I had been told when I started actually trying to practice this stuff, because it would have saved me a lot of misery and bar tabs. So that's what I'm going to share with you is some of the key stuff that I've learned. And one of the key things starts with Occam's razor. I'm an Occam's razor kind of guy. And Occam's razor is the premise that if you have two theories to explain something, the simpler theory is probably right. And so now in my work, when I go around to places, based on my own experience and going to different companies, I apply Occam's razor to explain why innovation happens or why it doesn't. And there's two very simple things that come into play if you follow this line of thinking. One is that most teams don't work. Most teams are dysfunctional. Most people don't trust each other. And I'd say, and this is fairly cynical and not based on actual data, it's purely opinion, I'd say one out of 3 teams universally is actually functioning well. Though on the teams that don't function well, there's no trust, people don't like each other, there's too much infighting and politics, then it's unlikely to be any flow of ideas. Ideas are not going to land anywhere, people are not going to offer them because they're not going to feel they're trusted if they say stuff. Second thing is that most leaders are not very good at taking risks. They're risk averse. And it's not their fault, because most people are risk averse. We talked about innovation so far lots of times at this event. I don't see anyone who's dressed innovatively. We all are conservative. You're all sitting in nice, neat little rows. There's lots of order and status quo. That's the nature of our species. We tend to conserve. We're protective. But to invent or do something new requires taking a risk. Even if you have a good idea, even if you're certain that you're doing something better than your competitor is, there's still risk involved. There's all these uncertainties you cannot control. If you can't take risk, you have a team that doesn't have trust, none of this other stuff matters. It doesn't matter what your budget is, doesn't matter what theory you're using, what kind of S-curves you make, it's irrelevant. Those two simple things. The next thing I want to talk about regarding Occam's razor has to do with our obsession and fascination with moments of brilliance, with epiphany. And a good part of the book, doing research for the book, I studied the history of epiphanies. I wanted to go back through all the mentions in all the magazines and all the movies, all the moments that are shown as being the breakthrough moment, and find out what actually happened. And in most cases, almost every case, I couldn't find, it was very difficult to find any examples of a breakthrough moment where the person who actually had it put as much value in it as the people who wrote about it later. Any flash of insight that you find, or almost all of them, there's a flash of insight, a moment where a new conception or understanding of a problem is realized, and that's always followed by a whole bunch of work. And that work and dedication to that work is the thing that's really rare. That's the thing that's worth examining and studying. You can find lots of people who have ideas for things and never do anything about them. Ideas are cheap. Any book you read on creative thinking, any course you take an improv class, ideas are easy. But finding a way to get the courage to go to your boss or your client or your management, whoever, to bet your reputation on that idea, that is rare. That's the thing that we should be worried about more than when the magic moment was. It should be, how did you convince someone? How did you get the courage to take that risk? How did you convince your team or your division that this direction that sounds crazy, because the future and the present usually does sound kind of crazy, to go and follow that stuff? The third thing I want to talk about is words. So I'm a word guy. I write and I speak, so words are my business. And there's an important word that I wanted to make sure got mentioned here at this event, and that word is reification. Reification. It's a very fancy word. I don't know many fancy words, but this is one that I know because it's important. And what the word reification means is the difference between the name for something, the word, and the actual thing. Words are cheap. They are free. You can take the word innovation and put it on the back of your product, put it in your marketing literature, put it in the name of your company, put it in your job title. The word does not mean you're actually doing it. But it's very easy to confuse the two. And so one of the things that I noticed, again, from my practitioner history and studying what people actually do, the famous people, what they actually do, look at the language that they use. A lot of what goes on in the business world today, we use words like innovative, disruptive, game-changing, breakthrough, goes on and on. This is not the language that most people who are actually doing invention or actually doing innovation tend to use. They use much simpler vocabulary, words like problem and solution and experiment and approach and prototype. Very simple, ordinary language. So whenever I hear these words, I'm invited into an organization to talk about this stuff, and there's a conversation going on when someone says the word innovation. I always raise my hand and I say, wait, what do you mean by that word? And usually when I ask that question, it takes them a minute because they're not sure what they mean. And I know if they're not sure what they mean, all the people who are listening to them are probably not sure either. Now usually when I ask people, and I've done a little bit of research on this, that usually means one of 5 things. It means we want to do something new, we want to do something new and good, we want to do something new and good and better and profitable, which is harder, or we want to take more risks, want to be aggressive, or we simply want to be perceived as being innovative. Now, any of those 5 things are very simple and clear and concise. And I argue when you use those terms instead of the word innovation, odds of you actually getting the results you want go up. So I'm almost out of time, and what I'd like to close with is actually an invitation. So I'm very grateful to the folks at The Economist for letting me be on the same stage as Jared Diamond and Robert Reich. It's kind of cool. But they also let me give you guys a gift. So I have 200 copies of The Myths of Innovation that are free. Anyone who wants them can grab them. They'll be out after the break. But my invitation is as follows. I'm an Occam's razor guy. I'd love for you to take a look at the book and apply your own sense of Occam's razor to the book. And maybe you have a simpler view of how this stuff works, and you can help me and inform my thinking. But by the counterpoint, if you read the book and help simplify your thinking about getting some of this stuff done, I'd love to hear from you as well. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.